So I've also got a lot of questions about like, hey, I want to build an outbound cold email program for my coaching service. I work with a lot of marketing agencies and I coach them on scaling their business. Helping agency work on their business versus in it. And I wanna find someone who can do cold email for me to get appointments for my coaching service. And I like to scale my outbound program. Okay, and my kind of knee-jerk reaction to 99% of these questions or these firms is going to be, don't do it. Let me tell you why. I have personally executed an outbound program that ultimately cost probably $250,000. That's $250,000 of the companies, with the help of one of the, if not the most legendary copywriter in existence today. His name starts with a D. His last name starts with a K. You can guess who that is. Altogether, it probably costs more than $250,000 when you consider the human resources cost, the time of the management, the sales operations, the marketing people, the 5 sales rep that I was managing, the direct mail that we did. So we did a combination of direct mail and a team of SDRs calling and following up on these companies that we sent a direct mail to, the list building, the VA team in the Philippines that did the lead sourcing, the time that both founders of the company invested into the strategy, my time as manager, the sales operation person that orchestrated the whole list and the email cadence and the phone call follow-up to it. All together, we invested $250,000 and 6 months into it. We had some meetings, maybe had a couple of sales, but I can tell you that it's definitely not worth the efforts. And I'm not saying that outbound doesn't work. Outbound absolutely works. The caveat here is it should probably be the last thing that you do. So Alex Hormozi talked about building his outbound program for Gym Launch. And I want to say at this point he was already doing close to 10 million a year inbound before he did the outbound program. So the short answer is, if you're wondering should you do cold email for your coaching service, I would say don't do it until you reach a certain level of income, of revenue. You should max out your inbound channels first, and then develop partnership channels. So like referrals, vendors, other companies that you can leverage their customer base for your coaching offers before touching outbound. And lastly, if you are going to do outbound, and eventually when you do outbound, hopefully you're at the point of like $5 to $10 million a year to do outbound, I would say give it at least a year. One of the biggest mistakes that I think we made with that company is we didn't give it enough time, but also we didn't know any better. We didn't have any expectation, and I didn't have the right experience at that time anyways. But definitely give it more time than you think it will take. Definitely not 90 days, as most of these cold email gurus would tell you. Give it a year, especially if it's a coaching offer. If you're a SaaS company like Salesforce, I know a lot of people reference Salesforce as like, hey, Salesforce is proof that outbound works. You gotta take some of these advice with a grain of salt, because there's 2 things that Salesforce has that most coaches out there don't. I would say most entrepreneurs don't either. Right? Number 1 is a crap ton of funding, right? Unlimited VC money with Salesforce. And 2 is you got to think about the market sophistication of Salesforce when it first came out. Like cloud sales CRMs was not a thing back then. This is kind of like if you ran Facebook ad back in 2015, 2016, 2017, it's like you can be a mediocre marketer and you still make sales. Salesforce back in the day was also the same way. Like no one else was doing cloud CRM. So you got to take some of these advice with a grain of salt. Outbound definitely works, but you have to have the right ingredients, right? So now that I've talked about why it doesn't work, let's talk about what you do need for your outbound program to work. Assuming you already got to $5 million a year or more, you've already maxed out inbound, and your partnerships, affiliates, channels. Then you want to tackle outbound. You need a long enough timeline, at least a year. Hormozi's, the best days when it comes to coaching for gym launch, for gyms, I think took him 1.5 years to 2 years. With the first 6 months of getting very little traction, little sales, and his own internal team telling him to quit in the first 6 months. So if you don't have at least a year time horizon, don't even think about it. But if you're going to think about it anyways, is you want to hire somebody or find somebody who've done this before. Not that they are going to do it, they have to have done it before successfully, is the second thing. The third thing is you really need to, and by the way, I think Hormozi talks about his closing percentages. I think it was 10% closing percentages. So like having the right expectation is also important. If you're used to closing 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% of your inbound leads and your inbound appointments, like Hormozi closes at 10% on attended appointments. Okay, so if you're going outbound, that's the top you will try to get to, not the baseline, right? So you want to have the right expectations as well. Your closing rate will not be the same as inbound. That's the third thing. The fourth thing is you have to have all of the right tools, right? You can't just be like, hey, just go and buy a bunch of lists on Upwork for me, and then hey, go send 100 emails a day, and then give me 5 meetings a day, right? Honestly, it never works that way. So you have to have all the right tools. At the very least, you need a list building tool, right? Where like names, emails, phone numbers. Then you need an enrichment process to verify email addresses, phone numbers. That might be a couple of tools in there together. Then you need a tool to consistently execute on emails automatically, and then phone calls for your reps to call, right? If you only do cold emails, that's fine. It also has to be a lot more specific. But I will tell you, most of the gurus out there promising book calls only from cold emails typically won't work for B2B. And if it's cold and your offer is coaching, forget about it. You're gonna have to make some phone calls for sure. Are there exceptions? Yes. But think more in there's a sliding scale, okay? I think it's probably the best way to explain it. How do you know? Do you need to do more? Do you need to do just email or LinkedIn? Can you do phone call? Where do you need to be? I think the hack here, think of this as a sliding scale. On the one hand, and this all have to do with your offer, right? On the one hand is how easy it is for you to explain your product or your service. On the other hand, on the other scale is how hard it is to explain it, right? And how tangible it is. So let me give you an example. A coaching offer would be somewhere like closer to the end of like, this is hard to explain on the tangible benefits. If I have a cancer treatment that is guaranteed to work in 30 days, cold email only will work all day long, right? It's easily explainable. If I can find a target market, it's a couple of emails and I would get very good response rates and results in meetings and close deals. If I'm on the sliding scale of like, hey, I will coach you on your agency and help you to get to $1 million a month in revenue or in profit, and it will take a year to do, and you're gonna have to do a lot of work with me, and I'm gonna teach you a bunch of things. People just don't buy coaching that way, right? Like even Tony Robbins, the godfather of coaching, of the coaching industry, doesn't sell his coaching services by sending cold emails. He does do outbound, but he's actually, I've seen the marketing, he will actually invite you to an event in person. And that's where the conversion happens. So the outbound process is not to try to schedule a strategy, a sales call. It's to actually drive attendance to an event. And so that's another topic for another day. So on that scale, if you cure cancer and you have a guaranteed way to do it in 30 days or in a couple of sessions, or we're taking a couple of pills, co-ML will work. If you're doing a coaching service, you're gonna have to do some work. They're gonna have to trust you as a coach. more touches, more phone calls and emails it's going to be required. So that's really the biggest thing. So that's why I don't recommend most coaching companies or service providers to do cold email to start. Now, if you have a web design offer for a specific niche with very desirable results, and you can back it up with evidence, cold email will work as well, very well as well, right? So the less tangible the outcome is, the more upfront work you're going to do with your outbound. So that's what I would say about building an outbound program. The last thing I will say is when you are going to do this, you as a founder or the VP of sales or head of sales has to be involved in it as much as the agency or the person you're going to hire to do this, because the person who is going to hire you to do it they're the product expert, they're the process expert. Like, how do we send a large number of emails? What cadences do we put in place? How many phone calls do we need to make? What do we say in these phone calls? How do we make sure that the reps are following the steps properly? They're the expert in the process, but they're not going to be the expert in your business unless they work in your business, right? So a lot of the times, the companies I've come across, they can't afford to hire somebody in-house to do this full-time, so they have to hire an agency or a third party. So that means this person is not working closely, they're not showing up to every single meeting internally. So you as the founder and the VP of sales need to be working closely with them to fine-tune the messaging and really have the ultimate creative control over the messaging. If you think about your marketing process, because this is outbound is just another way of marketing. Instead of one-to-many, it's one-to-one. You wouldn't just hire a one-off marketer randomly off the street, give them the key to your kingdom, and tell them, hey, go and make me more appointments, right? You would want to train them properly. You want to review the numbers, review the copy. Same thing has happened with the outbound process. So I would say, forget about the quick offer, the promise to the riches, like, hey, we'll schedule 20 meetings on your calendar a month from cold email only, and you don't have to do a thing. I have not yet to meet anybody that have been successfully doing that consistently, ongoing. And let me give you one last example as a warning. We contracted a third-party company who is supposed to be the expert at SaaS, outbound, at cold email and LinkedIn, great reviews online. We invested $7,000 a month for a whole year. That's $84,000 a year on this, on an offer that is free. Like, we're literally giving free software to a particular industry for a whole year, and these growth geniuses were supposed to be the expert. And for the whole year, I kid you not, I could count the number of total appointments that we schedule on the sales team on my fingers. And we invested $84,000 into it with nothing to show. Couldn't tell you if we closed one deal on these free offer, and ultimately that free offer should have led to software subscription buys, but I couldn't tell you if we actually ended up selling anything. So even with the best experts out there, you need to be in control and have a collaborative process with this person or this team, and hopefully they should be asking you for that, because they should know that nothing works like this hands-off thing where you just give them the keys to the kingdom and they book a bunch of meetings on a calendar. It sounded too good to be true, and it is. I would expect at least 90 days to 60 days, or 90 to 90 days, like 3 months to 6 months of closely working with you before getting this process dialed in. You know what else that means? Is it shouldn't be too cheap, right? I think $7,000 was way overkill for this specific service, given what we got. But anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000 per month is the minimum that I would be willing to. Like, if I was going to do this with somebody, knowing what I know about what doesn't work 99% of the time, to find that 5 to 10% of the copy, the cadence, strategy that works, it will take a significant investment on your part, and you should be willing to pay for this. And by the way, if you're going to follow my advice, at the point where you're doing $5-10 million a year already, it shouldn't be an issue for you to invest some money, even 10 grand a month into the Outbound program, because ultimately, if you can figure out Outbound, it's the most reliable way to generate appointments and scale revenue without being overly reliant on one channel, right? So I'll leave it at that for Outbound.